So good afternoon all, welcome to the session. My name's Traynor. I actually lead the careers guidance team in the university. So it's a pleasure to welcome you along to today's engineering industry strand webinar. So we're really lucky today. We've got three fantastic guests. We've got a sterling lineup of speakers to talk you through about their own career history, and hopefully that serves a useful purpose in thinking about how your own degree might eventually play out. Clearly, everybody's got their own unique career path, their own unique story, but a selection of speakers today from different parts of the engineering industry, just to whet some appetites hopefully and give you an idea of what might be possible. But today I'm really delighted we're joined by Kripa who's the project engineer at Risktec Solutions, from Kadeem Whittaker, who's an electrical engineer at Cundall, and Bill Price, who is an engineering director at WSP. So in terms of format, we're going to do the first half of the webinar, which each of our three guests giving a short presentation, just to tell a little bit more about who they are, what they do, and how their background, how their degree or whatever has prepared them for their career. So that will hopefully take us to about the halfway point. Obviously, we've got an hour or so with this session. Hopefully we'll get to about the halfway point then, and then there's plenty of time and space for probably the most important part, the Q&A, any questions. I guess without much further ado then, we can get straight into our first speaker. So we're delighted to be joined by Kripa, project engineer at Risktec Solutions. Kripa's going to take you through some slides and a story about our own professional career so far. And so I'll hand over to you, Kripa.
Thank you, Chris. Right, so good afternoon, everyone. So as you can see, I did chemical engineering at Newcastle. I'm just going to give you a quick few slides about how I got to where I am today. So a bit about me. So I went to Trinity Catholic College sixth form, which is in Middlesbrough, very close to Newcastle. And I studied maths, chemistry, biology, and philosophy and ethics. I wasn't really sure about going into engineering at all. In fact, I was going into, I was deciding to do something related to healthcare. But doing A-levels, I realised I really enjoyed maths and chemistry. So I decided to do 2 summer internships during year 12. One was with a company called SemCorp. It was a chemistry placement. And the other one was at Newcastle University. It was an field research placement, and it was a chemical engineering related one. So between the two, the first one was more, chemistry related, doing routine lab work, and it was very repetitive. The other one, which was at Newcastle Uni, the chemical engineering one, was quite interesting. It was quite challenging, and I decided, and in that I had to design my own reactor and carry out a reaction, and that went very well. And that's when I realised, that's it, I'm going to do chemical engineering, and I applied for Newcastle University as one of my 5. And I came in through the partners program, so I know exactly how you all feel today. So first 3 years of university was probably the most challenging ones. First year, everyone learns the basic modules, principles of chemical engineering, reactor engineering, transfer processes, thermodynamics, etc. During your first 2 years, there's a mixture of practicals and lab reports that you need to write. A few of them were more chemistry related, a few of them were to do with modules such as transfer processes. As chemical engineers, we don't just sit in the lab all day, every day. We do learn a lot of software. One of them is MATLAB, so we did a bit of programming. And during the first 2 years, you gain a lot of knowledge and you build on that knowledge every year. So when you get to 3rd year, you can design a plant from start to finish. So when I was in 3rd year, my group were responsible for designing a hydrogen production plant from clean energy and clean sources. So that was probably the most challenging year, but it was definitely a good one. During my time at uni in the first 3 years, at the end of 2nd year, I think it was, I did a research placement because although I couldn't find an industry one, I was fortunate to get one with the university. That was on bioelectrochemical systems, and that's basically, in simple terms, getting energy from, degrading organic matter, which is something that's been investigated in uni and by researchers. So I enjoyed it and was lucky enough to stay another year, and therefore I did a master's. So in my master's year, I specialised in sustainable engineering, especially with everything that's going on, including like global warming. I thought sustainability and sustainable engineering was the way forward, and I really enjoyed it. So we did some, all the engineering students do the main modules, such as advanced design project, a bit of bioprocess engineering and process intensification, as well as the specialising modules. A thing I have to say is that Newcastle Uni is one of the only unis in the UK to offer process intensification. And that's because the lecturers that teach us the subject are the experts in the world regarding this particular module. So yeah, I'd say that was a very good benefit of doing masters at Newcastle. One of the big things in our master's year is our research project, and mine was in carbon capture using alkanol amines and nickel nanoparticles. So I spent a lot of time in the labs. I'm someone who enjoyed doing lab work, hence I chose a research experiment that was within the lab. However, there are other options. A lot of people enjoyed modeling using software such as Aspen HYSYS and MATLAB, so they did that. And some others worked with, the process intensification researchers. So it was overall a very good benefiting experience. But yeah, chemical engineering sounds hard, and you will have time where it's difficult, but it's definitely a degree that's worth doing. Whilst at university, other than my actual, degree, I did stuff other than education. So I was a student ambassador. I was lucky enough to get the job as soon as I started uni, and I've done some of the partner summer school sessions over the past few years. I've also been fortunate enough to help with the overseas immersion program. So that's where students from Newcastle University in Singapore and Malaysia come over to Newcastle, and they get shown around the facilities, and they do some lectures. They also do trips away. So we took them to Durham, York, and Edinburgh. So that was a good experience. Also, I would say if you do end up at Newcastle Uni, try and get involved with the Newcastle Plus Award. It's a good way of networking, and it's something that's different to your degree. For us, we decided to create an automated marking system with the company called Accenture. So it's very different to chemical engineering, but interesting and something new. And you learn a lot of things from it, especially when you're working with people from various backgrounds. Normally, when you go into a job, you'll end up working with people who studied various subjects. So it's important to get along with them. So yeah. The other thing I did at university was join a few societies. I was on committee for the Hindu and Sikh Society, as well as Newcastle University South Asian Society, and I was a member of the Command Society. So that helps you take a break from the actual learning side of things. And today, so after graduating, I was lucky enough to get a job in August last year. So the first one was equipment reliability engineer with Risktec Solutions. And for that one, I was based on a nuclear power plant in Hartlepool. Some of the stuff on there, plant walkdowns, equipment reliability reviews, and preventative maintenance, you might understand some of it, you might not have heard of it at all. But in simple terms, I would say we look at the equipment that's on plant. We check what the defects are that have been raised over the few years. We also walk down the plant and actually go and see the equipment, see if there's something wrong. And then we decide to put into place programs to make sure that they're replaced, or if there's anything else that we can do to improve or optimize their performance. Then after that job in March, I moved to the Warrington office as a project engineer. So what we do at Risktec is we're a risk management company, and we are consultants for a lot of different industries. So we work with oil and gas, defense, nuclear, clean energy, and transport. So they're some of the companies that we work with. So currently I've done HAZOP stuff, which is a safety study subject that you learn about whilst you're doing your chemical engineering degree. And that was for a chemical dosing line at Sizewell B Power Station. And I'm also doing seismic probabilistic safety assessment at the moment, which is to do with how earthquakes can affect the structure and the structural integrity of the plant, and what can happen to the key critical equipments. So yeah, that's what I do at the minute, and I'm going on to do engineering changes, which is where I get involved in plant modifications, where I can make changes in terms of what equipment we have and adding new things in. So it's going to be interesting. But yeah, that's a bit about me, what I do right now. And here's a few tips for your time at university. If you can, do an industrial placement year or try and get a summer internship. They look good on the CV. And also, doing a chem eng degree, or any degree for that matter, is very different when you're studying. But when you're actually working in the industry, you learn a lot more. And there's a way of doing things, of how you apply your knowledge. So it helps. Use the career service. They are really helpful with internships, helping you find the right one for you, getting your CV sorted. They also do mock interviews in assessment centres that prepares you for your actual ones. Another thing that benefited me is going to the careers fair, because a lot of people come along to the careers fair and they'll be speaking about their company. So if there's something that you're interested in and you've made a good impression with the people there, it helps when you go for the interview, because they realize who you are and they actually remember you. So that's the other thing. As I've said before, join societies, it definitely helps. You meet a lot of new people who have same interests as you. Get involved in committee, because you have responsibility and you get a lot of transferable skills. Yeah, and most of all, make the most of your time at university. That's what I've got to say. Then I've prepared a question slide, but I think we're answering questions at the end. But yeah, thanks for listening, guys.
Super, thank you, Kripa. Really, really interesting. Just to see the two different site experiences you've had and the various different responsibilities so early in your career. Really interesting. And I suppose the message you made there about the extracurricular things that you got involved with during your time at Newcastle, and how that's hopefully helped you to get to where you are now is really useful and interesting as well. So thank you. But I'll hand over now to Kadeem.
Hi everyone, thanks Chris, thanks for that. Yeah, so my name's Kadeem Whittaker. I'm an electrical engineer at Cundall. My route's been a little bit different to what we've discussed previously, and you'll kind of see that as we go through the slides. So there won't be too much talk about uni, but I won't spoil the slides. So yeah, I'm originally from Hull. That's why the accent is not a Geordie accent. I relocated up here in 2020. I'm 28. Born in 1994. That's the other side of the millennium for a lot of people listening to this probably. And I've been working in the industry for 10 years in September. I'm actually the first person in my family to study for a degree. So if there's anyone listening who is in a similar boat, don't let that put you off. It's something that you can easily do. You may not have people in your family you can relate to, but you'll find peers, you'll find friends who have been through a similar experience. My career, I started in 2012 and as an electrician's apprentice for a company called Vic Coupland in Hull. I was working on a walk-in health centre, which is the photo you can see on the screen at the top. And this is kind of where my interest for the theory side of electrical started. I was taken under the wing by a colleague called Nick, who was a little bit older than me, and I was often referred to as my work dad because he kind of took me under his wing and explained everything on the installation and theory side to me. As I was completing my apprenticeship in 2016, I was approached by a engineering consultancy, building services consultancy, who asked if I was interested in taking a bit of a changing career path and becoming an electrical design engineer. So from there, I spent 3 years working for a small company in Hull called Ridings Consulting Engineers. Whilst I was here, I was studying for my level 4 HNC and my level 5 HND. So basically I was on day release. So I spent 4 days a week working and 1 day a week at Leeds College of Building, working towards my level 4 and 5 qualifications, which is essentially the equivalent of first and second year of your degree. In June 2020, as we all know, it was a pretty hectic time due to COVID, and I took the decision to relocate up to Newcastle. And from June 2020 to September 2021, I worked at 2 different contractors. So I made a jump from consultancy, which is, I mean, we'll maybe get into this on the questions, but is it slightly different to contracting? So the first one was they specialised in modular design of buildings. So essentially, you construct a building in a factory in small parts and then ship it to site and put all the small parts together. There's some stuff you do on site, but that's essentially what modular design is. And the second contractor was a clean room and process specialist who did a lot of work for pharmaceutical and biotech companies. So it gave me kind of some experience in fields that I'd not done previously. And then in October 2021, I came back to consulting and joined Cundall, which I'm currently working at now. The second photo you can see at the bottom of the screen is the latest project I've worked on at Cundall. It's Pilgrim's Quarter in the heart of Newcastle city centre. If you know where Stack was in the city centre, you've probably seen the works going on in that area. The demolition works, and yeah, that's a scheme I'm currently working on at Cundall. I'm also currently finishing my degree, so I've just started it in January. It's an 18-month top up to get my full degree. June next year I'll have my full degree. So I'm still, even though I've been in the industry for 10 years, I don't actually have that. So it's a bit of a different step to what you probably will hear from other people presenting today. So Cundall, we're a multidiscipline engineering consultancy. This is just some of the services we offer. I work in the building services department as an electrical engineer, paired up with mechanical engineers, basically providing the power, lighting, fire alarm, security, heating, ventilation, AC, anything that makes a building run. As long as it doesn't make it stand up, we basically do it. But as you can see on there, there's a ton of things that we do. We're multidiscipline, and it's really good because we get the opportunity to work with other disciplines internal to Cundall. It gives you the opportunity to understand what design constraints and what problems and solutions can be created and solved by other disciplines. And these are some of the sectors that we work in. So higher education, aviation, critical systems, infrastructure. I'm doing a lot of offices at the minute and some heritage projects as well. And we do retail and sports and leisure as well. And we also have offices across the world. So I'm based in the Newcastle office. This has given me the opportunity to work on larger projects, which I wouldn't have the chance of at my previous company, which was a small company. On a day-to-day basis, I'm attending meetings, both internal and external. This can be across the offices with other companies. I'm also drawing and modeling electrical design in 3D software, 2D software, and I'm also creating documents to support the drawings and models, so calculations and specifications. You do need to create drawings for people to build off, but it's important that these are backed up with technical information as well. And in addition to this at Cundall, I've also had the opportunity to take on non-project related work. I'm a part of the UK and Republic of Ireland Technical Committee, so I help develop documents and guides for technical solutions for new software for the company. So currently working on 3D cable calculation software, which allows us to size the cables for a project based on real life 3D models. I'm also a part of the Digital Engineering UK, Republic and Ireland Hubs team, which helps provide a link between engineers and technicians for software and modeling solutions. And I feel like I've run through that, but looking at the time, that's my time. So I think that's me done. Chris, if you want to hand over to Bill.
Super, Kadeem, really, thank you very much. And I love the term you used there, multidisciplinary, which I guess for people on the call, you might have come across that term, or you might not. If you haven't, you'll probably hear a lot more of it in the next few years. My own background is not really for today, but I also worked as an engineer before coming into HE, and or higher education, I should say, and I was the manufacturing engineer. And certainly my experiences were there of collaboration between graduates from different engineering disciplines. So we often select a subject quite early on and then think that's our sort of linear area. But in reality, in industry, there's a lot of overlap, and that multidisciplinary team is really crucial. And so the opportunity to see that from different perspectives and work with colleagues and engineers in different areas is such a fundamental part, I think, of being an engineer, and really interesting to see that come through in Kadeem's presentation. So thanks. Great. Okay, Bill, over to you. Bill, as I mentioned, Engineering Director, WSP, and will tell you his own story.
Hello, everybody. So I'm Bill Price. I'm a director at WSP, a great big international engineering, property, transport, environmental consultancy. I'm going to tell you a bit about my time at university and my career. So I graduated in 1981. The wonderful bridge was there even then. You may be interested to know. What did I do at Newcastle? We heard some great stuff earlier about what people did. And none of this really is about engineering, actually. I did do civil engineering, but I was the sport and drama photographer for the Courier. And one of your colleagues recently sent me this, and you can see, look, I'm credited with the photograph. I'm not interested in sport at all, but I was the photographer. And I think this plays into that idea of, broadening what you do. I used to be part of the film festival. For some reason, my pals were really in dentistry and English. I'm not sure really how that came to pass, but I think I learned something from them as well. I learned to ski. I'd always played the cello as in a youth orchestra at home, but the Newcastle Orchestra was too good and I couldn't get in. So that was a bit of a shock to the system. And I think probably in the third year or fourth year, we built a concrete canoe. Well, we built two actually, and we had to get them to a lake in the south of England, and one of them broke up and had to be ditched on the M1 on the journey down there. But those were a few of the interesting things I did. When I left Newcastle, times were tough and it was hard to get a job, but my first job was with a contractor working in Derbyshire, and it was in tunnelling. So it's this dotted line you can see on here, the aqueduct from Carsington Reservoir down to the River Derwent, and that dotted line was actually 2 tunnels and a bit of open cut, and I worked in all the bits of that, and had a very amazing time. Actually, I very much enjoyed that, the camaraderie of the miners and me trying to point the tunnel in the right direction, learning for real how to do some surveying. So that was all very interesting. But then, of course, you need to get chartered. So I was seconded to a firm of consulting engineers in London called Kensington Little, actually. And whilst I was down there, the most exciting and interesting job I did was this, which is now listed at Sainsbury at Camden with Nicholas Grimshaw. So this was working with a kind of signature architect on a very important building of his time, albeit a supermarket. But that began to shape my career and the sorts of things I was going to be interested in. So I've already kind of moved from civil engineering to structural engineering now. And in the process, about 1987, became chartered, which is, of course, the major step for engineers in terms of career development, I think. So that is a tough thing to do. It's hard at the beginning of your career. You maybe have a young family, hard to carve out the time, but it really, really is a big stepping stone on the journey of a career. I started beginning to build small engineering teams, building relationships with clients and winning work. And one of the jobs I won was the thing called the Brit School in Croydon. This is a relatively recent photo of Mr. Rogers from Chic, who visited the school because he's one of their sort of supporters. But that school in Croydon was a kind of win for me. And I remember that as the sense of winning work and then doing work. That was part of my life. In the early 2000, I got seconded to the Royal Shakespeare Company, not as an actor, that actually isn't me, but as a project manager, because as an engineer and as someone in the property world, I brought some insight into their redevelopment project that they didn't really have. So I was like an in-house representative, and that was a very exciting time. It was about 4 years. I used to do about 3 days a week. And I think that demonstrates the kind of diversity that you can engineer or create in a career in engineering. You don't have to be pigeonholed into one thing or another. There are lots of things come available. I then started to manage the London office, and at this approximate same time, began to build our credibility in high-rise design, which then led on to WSP winning this job, the Shard in London. So we were the engineers for this project, and we did the transport and a few other things. And for me personally, it led to quite a lot of international work or international travel and business development, and kind of, you know, an amazing period, really. Not very good for my carbon footprint, probably, but exciting and interesting nonetheless. And in addition, mentoring, managing business development associated with growth. So I enjoyed that very much, and again, you know, rather different. So here is what WSP has become, and the company I joined was about 400 or 500 people, and now it's 55,000 across the world. There's UK and Ireland at 7,300. I'd say largely in infrastructure, road, rail, and so on. But we are a very, very big consultancy. My colleague on this call, Kadeem, Cundall, are a more niche or smaller player, but not big isn't always better. And I'm sure, you know, there are many, many fantastic roles in all sorts of different companies. In addition, sort of in terms of breadth of what I do and where engineering is useful, I'm a trustee of the Royal Society of Sculptors and of the Rose Theatre, both of whom have projects. They need experts like us to support them. I did actually found a thing called Construction Rocks, which was like a battle of the bands for bands in construction. I think Cundall may have had a band actually in the early days. Anyway, we can come back to that. And I'm, you know, quite a bit to do with our business now in terms of knowledge, the culture, promoting the brand and the reputation. And these are not engineering things, you know, these are kind of other aspects of, if you like, intellectual engagement with business and with engineering. So in conclusion, you know, Newcastle, what a great city. I had a great time at that university, made contacts, built a career, you know, used my degree in many, many different ways. And now I feel to be part of a community of engineering, collaborating across many, many disciplines. So I hope that's okay for me. And no doubt we'll talk about things in the second half of this session. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. Thank you. Really fascinating. Yeah, Johnny, you've been on there, and I suppose sometimes it's interesting to think how at the outset of your career, it might not always be possible to predict where you're going to end up, but to see how that has played out for you, the international dimension, the opportunity to work in projects such as the Shard in terms of the profile that brings, and the company growth from 300 to 400 initially to 55,000 now. I guess what huge, probably unexpected growth, Johnny, to be a part of. What excited Johnny. So really interested to see that in that larger multinational perspective in many ways as well. So great. Thank you, everybody. I can see there's a number of questions coming through in the chat. So thank everybody on the call for feeding these through, and please continue to do that. We might have to be quite efficient as our panelist team to get through these all, because they are coming through quite thick and fast. So I'll just go through them in terms of the way that they have arrived. Kripa, the first one's for you. Do you assess risks in power plants within the UK only, or internationally as well?
Basically, so I've only started working since August, and I've predominantly worked with EDF energy within the UK. However, we all know that there's power plants all across the world. I myself haven't done this, but I know that some of my colleagues are currently working for Norway's nuclear power plant and helping them with their decommissioning. So yeah, we do work with power plants that's not just in the UK, to answer that question.
Great, and there's a follow-up there, which is probably similar in some ways in terms of the practicalities of the role, and this is to what extent you work with disciplines from other engineering disciplines, other colleagues from other engineering disciplines. Is that a feature of your role?
Yeah, so it, like, you know, whatever engineering company that you work for, I think you will always end up working with different people that are from different engineering backgrounds, and that's why you have multidisciplinary teams. At the moment, I work with mechanical and civil engineers due to the nature of the work that the current project. So yeah, you do meet a lot of different engineers whilst you're working.
Great, thanks. Yeah, that's picking up on something we spoke about earlier on, I suppose. And then the last one is just when we're on that first presentation story, Kripa. If you were to gaze into the future, how much do you think the demand for engineers in the sustainable energy industry will increase?
I think it's going to go up quite a bit because, for example, one of my friends who also did chemical engineering, she works at a coal power plant. And obviously, with us transitioning from the typical old power plants, we're going to sustainable and environmental friendly, power plants. There's a few new power plants being built in the south of the country, so therefore there will be a high demand for the engineers that we're going to need in the future. So yeah,
one of those exciting growth industries. Great, thank you. So presentation 2 then, Kadeem, there was a couple from your side of maybe to pick up on at this stage. One, actually, I really like this question, quite a simple question, but I think cuts the chase in terms of everything that we're hoping to get from this session. What is an average day like as an electrical engineer?
Yeah, I mean, before I answer that, it's probably important to clarify that I'm a building services electrical engineer. So there's obviously electrical engineers that are building services, and then there's electrical engineers that do circuit boards, etc. So I kind of design the services for a building. I suppose it depends on what projects and stages they're at, but what a good resource outside of this to look into would be the REBA Plan of Work 2020 or BISRIA BG6, which are great resources for showing what you produce during the life cycle of a project. A typical day, I'll maybe have a design team meeting where the design team, which will be structural engineers, civils engineers, architects, mechanical, electrical engineers, we'll kind of get together to provide updates and any problems we may have encountered and possibly solutions. It allows us to sort of track the progress of a project and ensure that we're hitting deadlines and that any issues that are coming up have been raised to the full team. It's quite easy to lose stuff in the amount of emails you receive on a day, to be perfectly honest. And then we'll action these on the back of the meeting. So I'll kind of create 3D models within Revit, which can be used to create 2D plans, which then create drawings, which people build off on site essentially. And then I'll also produce documentation that back these up. So you may have a drawing, but you need documentation that says, I want this type of light to be used. And when you're terminating a cable, it needs to be a certain good practice essentially.
Great. Yeah, and one of the things I think you mentioned in your initial remarks was this distinction between consulting and contracting. Is it worth maybe just saying a little bit about that as well, your perceptions on how those different roles might change that average day?
So essentially, the consultant, I mean, generally speaking, the consultant will design a project and this will then get handed over to a contractor whose job is to then either, depending where the design's been left, either carry on the design and then install it or just install it to the drawings. So yeah, I've worked at a contractor and consultant in the past. I think it's one of those that you probably have to try out to see which one you prefer, to be perfectly honest. I do prefer consulting myself, but I know a lot of very good engineers who are in contracting and would never want to go into consultancy because it's you look after one job for a certain amount of time, whereas I'm kind of in multiple jobs at one time, maybe with slightly less detail than they are.
Yeah, it's a question that comes up a lot. We hear that from students often. I mean, they hear these phrases, not necessarily sure what they mean necessarily or how they differ. But for a lot of engineering employers, that distinction between consulting and contracting is an option that is presented to students. And so it's always interesting to hear perspectives. Bill, I don't know if you've got a perspective on that and how those two different areas differ and what that might mean for the people on the call.
Well, I mean, it is quite different. I would say many contractors now do consulting type services. So even if you were with a Mace or a Bechtel or a Langer Rourke, there are roles that are more like the role I have. I just want you know that when I did have a great time in Derbyshire working for a contractor. Shift work, wellies, being wet through, trying to make a tunnel in the ground. But I did prefer consultancy as a kind of seem to suit my character and my, my interests. I would say, I am an engineer, but I wonder if Kadeem and Kripa might be a more gifted sort of technical engineer than I ever was. But I think recognizing that within engineering there are different levels of skill and capability, and I'm sure both of them know that their relationships with their clients and their boss and their the stakeholders and people, and actually being able to communicate about technical stuff in straightforward language is a really important skill. And I would say I do know the people in this building down here in London who are a sort of a better engineer than me, more able in that area, but they cannot explain what they're doing very well to a client, to an architect, and so on. And so I've always felt there's lots of scope for different kinds of skills in communicating what engineering is about.
Yeah, and I suppose that's probably quite hard sometimes to understand at the beginning of your university career which of those skills are your greatest strength areas or interest areas. And so maybe, and I think Kadeem mentioned this, throughout the course of your undergraduate, if you get the chance to get involved in different things, work experience related or internships, and Kripa mentioned that as well, then it gives you the chance to test out, is actually my skill set, my interest in this area or that area. There is likely to be a place for lots of different interests in the engineering sector. It's about, having that iterative test and learn mentality, I think, during your undergraduate to seek out those different areas so that you can make some choices as you get towards final year at that point. So great, okay. Questions are coming through thick and fast, so thank you everybody, and I think we'll try and get through these quickly. So Kadeem, just picking up on yours area again, there was one about from Luke actually asking really to compare your own experience on the apprenticeship programme versus, say, an industrial placement, and whether, in your view, the apprenticeship is better or worse. I don't know if you've got much experience of the industrial placement route or whether that's something you could contrast, but yeah, your views on the apprenticeship route versus a different route, perhaps.
Yeah, I think this piggybacks perfectly off what Bill's just said, to be honest. I think, assuming you mean, a sort of short-term placement in blocks or over summer, I say this how you prefer to learn, and I think that's the key thing for university and life in general, to be honest. I prefer to be hands-on and break things down into smaller tasks gradually, and so it suited me perfectly. I mean, I've done 2 consecutive apprenticeships, so I must like them. But I don't think there's a right or wrong answer. I think you just need to try and work out how you like to learn. To be honest, I did my A-levels, and when I did my A-levels, I didn't know how I like to learn. I just learned how my tutors taught me. I probably didn't learn until I was about 22, 23, how I actually like to learn myself. And then it totally changed my learning experience, and I enjoy it a lot more than I did when I was doing my A-levels, to be honest. So yeah, I think you just need to identify how you like to learn and go from there. If you're happy condensing things into one block, then obviously that's going to be the better way to do it. If you like break it into smaller tasks, then that might an apprenticeship may be the route for you. Yeah, the degree apprenticeship.
Yeah, great. That was a very sensible answer. Thanks. Bill, there's a few for you. I'm trying to see if I can group some of these. So was one you mentioned the chartership process. I think the question was, how long did it take? But there's also one from Finlay which looks beyond that to say, actually, how do you think the necessary skill set of an engineer has changed throughout your career, perhaps since that chartership point and then thereafter? How has that sort of skill set requirement changed for engineers, and how might it change again in the future?
Okay, well, I'll answer the easy one first. I mean, I think you'd be doing well to be chartered within 4 years of, getting into the industry. And at one time, they used to insist on this thing about doing some time with the contractor and doing some time in design. That is a lot more fluid now. So I think it can be achieved in a more straightforward way, which I totally agree with, by the way. But for 4 years, I think it probably took me 6 years, partly because they changed the rules halfway through, which I was a bit cross about. But let's not go there. You're just going to remind me. It's a period, and it's it's a professional qualification. You'll find you can sign people's passports and do interesting things, and I can't stress enough how valuable it is to your career. It's a proper marker in the sand. Nobody can take it away. You need to find a way how to do that. In terms of changing, I've seen this amazing change. I mean, the drawings I did for that Camden Sainsbury were in ink on tracing paper. Okay, now you compare that today, where most engineers, coming out of universities, aren't even taught how to draw. Virtually everything is, Revit, it's CAD, it's three-dimensional. But I think what's important as engineers is to be able to think in my kind of engineering, is to be able to think in 3D and communicate about it. And if you sort of, I always feel that if you can't draw it, you can't explain it. So I see, I know it's probably terribly boring of me to say this, but today, if we looked in my notebook right now, I've got sketches and things, and I'll be with a client, and the client will say, well, what do you mean? You come off that escalator and then you go down those stairs and around there. And I'll say, right, it's like this, and it lubricates the wheels of communication, I feel. And layered on top of that, there was a comment earlier about climate change and carbon and net zero and all of that. Are engineers sort of important to the future? They are important with a capital I. This world is not going to get sorted out without us. And so I really think it's an amazing place in the world and in your education. And there's just so much going on that needs our skills. So it's definitely not drying up.
Super, thanks, Phil. So in the last stretch, so there's a few questions I want to try and get through, but one very specific one, Bill, I wonder if you could answer quite quickly. If you graduated as a civil engineer, will you still have a good understanding and be able to work in the field of structural engineering?
I think you can, because I think increasingly there is once you've been through Newcastle or a university education, you are capable of learning. That's what it's about. And firms like us and Cundall and Kripa's employer, teach you. What they're dealing with is a clever person, motivated, clever person, to be educated into a new way of doing stuff. I increasingly think it doesn't matter. We've got people that did physics, chemistry, environmental sciences, all sorts of stuff. They're just clever and motivated, and that's great raw material for us. So I don't think you should feel restricted by I don't know what the others feel about that.
No, I think that's 100%. I think everyone's becoming, I don't want to say jack of all trades, that's not the right way of saying it, but it's becoming so much more inclusive in terms of who works with who discipline-wise and on projects. I think, everyone's got something to bring to the table, and I think it's important to work collaboratively on projects.
Yeah, I agree with what both Bill and Kadeem said. I feel like whatever job you go into and whatever industry it may be, especially in engineering, you end up working with lots of different people from various backgrounds. And I think when you go into industry, one thing that you learn is that you actually learn a lot more about how it works in industry, as well as applying what you've learned. And things are sometimes very different to how you've been doing them. So the whole point is you should be able to adapt and quickly pick up things. And that's how engineering really works. And throughout your degree, that's what you're trained to do, to learn new things rather than keep and reiterating what you already know. It's to think outside the box. So, yeah.
You've explained that much better than me, Kripa.
It's also really interesting, actually, if you look at the employment market, the flexibility that many employers are now placing on the entry requirements for their positions. 10, 20 years ago, it was much more restrictive in terms of the degree subject, the degree classification. Now, and it picks up the point that's just been made, I think they're looking for your ability to learn, your motivation to learn, and the transferable skills that you might have gained, yes, from your academic skills, but also from the extracurricular stuff that Kripa was talking about earlier on, or other outside interests. That becomes evidence of your ability to problem solve and to work in teams and to manage your time effectively. So that's that more holistic way of assessing candidates and the more flexible way of interpreting subjects and degree classifications, I think is a positive direction that a lot of graduate employers have taken. So it gives you more choice. Right. Two last quick questions. One which is similar to what Niall's been mentioning in the chat. Very briefly for everybody, what is the best part and the most stressful part of your job?
The best part, I think, is probably meeting new people and seeing how they relate to you. So if it's a good job, you're all happy. If it's not a good job, you're all in the same boat. I think the other best bit is that you get to travel. And I think if you go into any engineering, you do end up traveling, depending on what you do, especially in consultancy or whether you're working for a plant. So I might be going to Madrid in the next few weeks. So that's what I'm excited about. The worst bit is that it does get challenging at times, but I think the attitude you must have is like, no matter what job you go into, there's going to be good bits and bad bits. The challenging bits and the bad bits are going to come and you're going to overcome it. And that makes you a better engineer and just a better person. So just embrace it. So yeah, that's what I'd say.
That's good. Thank you. Kadeem?
Yeah, I'd say the best part's working with other engineers and stakeholders. It can be very easy to not see the forest for the trees, and fresh perspectives can really help on this. Everyone has their own experiences and knowledge to bring to the table, as this presentation is probably showing everyone today. Most stressful part is probably you can feel a bit overwhelmed with the amount of information that's out there, and you may feel that you need to be an expert on every single little bit of information that's out there. But I think it's probably more important to know where to find the information. That's a tool and a skill in itself. So as long as you know that, then don't worry if you don't know everything in the world.
Thanks. Bill?
I think for me, the best part is at the beginning of a job where I'm very much trying to kind of invent a project. And if you look at the Shard and at Paddington Station and other things, there's a kind of point where you're like on a equal with the client and maybe the architect, where you're trying to kind of think, what could this be? What could we make here? So that's the bit I most enjoy, when it all turns into the really hard work of mathematics and calculations. You can't see me for dust, really, but I've helped to create the job. I think what can be challenging is if you're really involved in the engineering and the kind of project stuff, you need to just watch out in a company for the sort of internal politics, the kind of who's really pulling the strings inside. Where is your career going, and what do you need to do? And I think you need to keep your eye on that ball as well. So there's your kind of work life, and then there's your kind of internal business life, and it's quite hard to keep a good balance of both. And I think those are some of. So it's the other stuff that I've sometimes found, a bit unstraightforward at times. So the lesson could be to pay attention to it.
Yeah, I guess it's one of those skills you develop over your career as well, isn't it? I suppose. Yes. So sure, really interesting. Yeah, go please.
Can I just add a little thing? So, obviously you're all going in to do uni, hopefully. So I'd say one thing is it's not about what you know. It's also about who you know, because when you go on to work with different people in the future and you don't know a particular thing, you feel like you need to know everything in detail, as Kadeem says, but no, don't be stressed about that. There's going to be experts from different backgrounds. Honestly, you'll learn a lot more that way than trying to do it yourself and finding the right resources when you've got someone who can just tell you everything you need to know, rather than you just cramming yourself with so much information. So yeah,
great. Thanks. Okay, well, we are fast approaching the end, but there's one question that we're asking all the industry strand panelists, and I wonder if we could just get everybody on the call's just perspective. Then we're going to try and clip these together and hopefully have a bit of a summary. But the final kind of unifying question, if you like, is that basically considering your time on your studies and in your professional career industry, what one piece of advice would you like to share with the partner students?
I would. Yeah, so I think this has been touched on, but I think there are things you just need to not give up on. You know, I think people admire persistence and kind of commitment to what you kind of believe in, and so if you can probably push something along if you believe in it and then make it happen. So do believe in your your skill and your knowledge.
Yeah, and I think mine probably piggybacks a bit onto what Bill says there, is that it will be challenging, but it doesn't mean that you can't do it necessarily. It's like going to the gym. You don't expect to come home not tired. It's something that will be challenging, but it'll be worthwhile in the end, and you will be able to do it. You just need to, as long as you put the work and give yourself enough time to relax as well, then you'll be fine.
Yeah, I think the one thing that I would say is make the most of every opportunity that you get, whether it's a good one or a bad one. You actually end up learning a lot more from the bad ones than the good ones. And to add on to what Bill and Kadeem said, if nothing's challenging, it's not really worth it. If it's challenging, that's when you actually are making a difference, is what I think. So yeah.
Wonderful, thank you. And a positive note to finish on. First of all, a huge thank you to our three panelists for being here today, for sharing your stories so honestly and with so much wisdom and encouragement. Enjoy the rest of the week, enjoy the rest of the day, and hopefully see you all soon.